Do you guys look at trail maps? How do you guys figure out your trails when you're out running
Facebook Live.
Go to the sign of the trail.
We are live with Human Potential Running Series.
There's something called
with Sherpa and Hollis and Trent Briney.
I can have one.
So, the bathroom should be painted.
So Miguel decides he's going to run between 5 and 50 miles.
Look at all these awesome people.
I just keep on going.
But if you can put this in your back pocket and it's waterproof and not terrible. So anyway, Golden, Buffalo Creek, some of our favorite places. Some of the places the races are.
Hi, Lori. Lori Hall is watching.
Are you live already?
We're live.
Oh, sweet.
Awesome.
I just started it.
Thanks for coming, everybody. We appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us here. It's great to be in the new RNK. It's been quite a year for RNK, and so our hearts and best thoughts go out to you guys as you continue to rebound from what happened last April, and you guys have done a magnificent job to reopen a wonderful store here. It's awesome to come in here and shop. So we encourage folks to come check out our Facebook Live. We are here from the Human Potential Running Series. If you don't know who we are Colorado's largest series of ultra marathons. It's not up to us. We're really proud of that. We've got 8 events now that span the calendar year, and we're actually hoping to add a 9th. An event that we like to call a death race, which is for obstacle course
the free one.
Folks. Yeah, for sure. We'll get into that.
You pay if you finish.
A little bit about us. My name is Sherpa John. I've been running ultra marathons for 13 years. And in that time, I've managed to find the finish line of 100 miles or more 23 different times, including one complete loop at the famed Barkley Marathons in Tennessee. People mostly know me as a runner and a race director. They don't know that I also have a degree in outdoor education, which some folks also call experiential education. I used to be a corporate adventure trainer. I worked with a lot of different Fortune 500 and 100 companies on helping their teams work more cohesively. I've also worked with professional athletes like Team Garmin Sharp, men's Tour de France bike racing team, CU women's basketball, and the guy up there is Tedy Bruschi. You may not know who he is because he's a New England Patriot, and you guys hate the Patriots. But basically, he's the Von Miller of the New England Patriots about a decade ago. So I had the privilege of guiding Tedy on a hike. Just some of the clientele that I've worked with. And I'm also a member of the Association for Experiential Education. I used to be the Rocky Mountain Regional Chair. I oversaw the international conference a couple years ago, and we're just kind of now getting re-involved with that. And this is Hollis, and I'm going to let her tell you about her.
Hi. I'm the Director of Human Experience at Human Potential, which is the cool title that John came up with. Basically means I get to think about the psychology of the runners at all times, which is great. I have 2 bachelors from Ohio State in psychology and criminology. I'm currently pursuing my master's at DU in sport and performance psychology, which is the premier college to go to for that currently. I coached Ohio State's triathlon team for 3 years. I've coached a couple other teams from little guys to, I have a 69-year-old client right now who's kicking butt. And I now own my own company. I left corporate world as a coach and a trainer to pursue something larger than just losing weight and getting fit. I want people to change their lives so that they can change the world.
So
and that's
Hollis,
Kamiko, by the way, we were talking about. That's her.
Oh, that's awesome.
Hollis is the only director of human experience in all of ultra running. Folks think that the job of a race director is pretty easy. You find a place to run, you get a couple permits, you hang up some ribbons, put some water and food out, and say go. We like to do a little bit more than that. That's not what Human Potential is. If you don't know who we are or what we do, this talk is kind of designed to share with you a little bit about who we are and what we do and try to explain to you how our races work. There are some folks out there who think that our races are really hard, and so are our Fat Ass series. They are, if you want them to be. And our goal tonight is to try to tell you a little bit about how to change your mindset. And we're going to do that by a 3-step process we like to call what, so what, now what. We're going to tell you what we want you to know. so what, why we want you to know it, and now what, which is what we want you to walk away with from our talk. So Human Potential running series was created to help people discover what it is to be human. I think in our day and age, especially with social media the way it is now, we tend to forget that people mess up. People make mistakes. They say the wrong thing. They do the wrong thing. You succeed sometimes. You fail sometimes. That's what uniquely makes us human beings. And so part of our overarching mission with HPRS is to help people discover what it is to be human again, if you will. And we do that by, we've created a series of races that challenge all of our runners mentally and physically. And also, we use adversity as a tool. And adversity is the tool that helps you grow as an individual, okay? And in one of our podcasts, we have a podcast that comes out every Tuesday. It's called Ultra Stories. In the last couple weeks, I've kind of thrown a sentence out there into the podcast that local Jamie Reigler says he loves. But it's positive social change through athletic endeavors. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to help people be better humans through the adversity they face at our races and by accomplishing amazing things. You don't need to be an ultra runner to do that. Of course, in my experience, I've been running ultra for 13 years, and I got into running specifically to become an ultra runner. So sometimes I may forget or skip over the half marathon or marathon crowd. I don't do that intentionally. It's just I'm trying. I'm human. But on our website, the mission statement says, Human Potential is the voice in your head that dares you to dream it, moves you to do it, and wills you to experience it. It is unlimited. And we're going to explain to you what human potential is and how exactly it is unlimited, okay? And Hollis and I are going to kind of trade off back and forth here. So the guy up here is a guy by the name of Abraham Maslow. Raise your hand if you've ever heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Nice.
All right, there's some of you. What is Maslow's hierarchy of needs, Hollis?
Maslow's hierarchy of needs is the thing that will pop up on Google if you search for self-actualization. It's one of the only theories out there that explains how to self-actualize. And it's a theory he wrote in 1943 and then published in 1950 or 1951?
51.
Approximately.
But what did we discover about his research in creating this theory?
It was baloney, and he actually not only admitted to it later, he rewrote this theory and called it Theory Z later on. A decade after. He picked 1% of a healthy college population and handpicked the people that he was going to do this research on. And if you've ever done research, you know that's a big no-no. It's supposed to be randomized. You don't pick your subjects, and by picking them, you can't extrapolate anything from this except that it could work for those very healthy white males in that one population. Nobody else.
And of course, the individuals he picked are individuals that he deemed as having perfect mental health. How many people do you know that have perfect mental health?
I'm the only one in this room.
Congratulations, Harold.
What's up, Harold? And that's because you're retired.
What am I doing?
When was that picture taken?
Oh, who knows?
Only white males have perfect health. Perfect health. Everybody else is messed up.
One of the things we noticed about Maslow's hierarchy of needs is that everything on it is an external factor. There are things that you need to collect from the outside world, not within yourself, but from others, other people, other resources, other places. They're all external. So we started to look at that, and I was like, how can that be? Like, I think you said something the other day about being locked in a dark room.
Right. So we thought about a couple of people, but for example, Gandhi, I'm sure people would think he's a pretty self-actualized person. He was not physically safe. He was not physically healthy. I'm pretty sure he probably never had sex, and all of those are listed on this to be a self-actualized person.
Sure.
Some of the people you think is the most wholesome self-actualized people you know, maybe like Martin Luther King Jr., not safe, not in a good environment. Like all those external needs were not met, yet he still was living to his potential as a human being. So how is that possible?
Ooh.
Life is a journey.
So then there's this other theory out there. And I just want to mention, like, people that we know in our circles who think and talk about psychology on the regular, they kind of treat these theories as laws. What's the difference between a theory and a law?
Well, first you start with a hypothesis,
Okay.
and hypothesis bridges to a theory when there's research to back it up. Then theory bridges to law when almost no research can go against you. So mostly laws exist in hard sciences like physics and things like that. Psychology has very few laws because it's hard to prove something inexorably in every human being possible.
So in this graphic, we have left and right brain psychology. How many of you have heard before that you're either left-brained or right-brained? Or you know of this concept? Well, guess what? This, too, is flawed. What do you know about left-right brain? Oh.
So left brain, right brain, the way that they talk about it, even now, is about your creative side and your analytic side. And that some people operate more on one side than on the other. And it's actually supposed to be an anatomical split, that your left brain is more dominant or your right brain is more dominant. But it's blurry.
So in 2015, the University of Utah released the results of a 3-year study that determined that after over 1,000 people from age 77 to 29 that they did research on, they were able to determine that this does not actually exist. It's a complete myth. You are not more one side or the other. Your hemispheres always work perfectly together. Now, of course, we understand that some people are definitely more analytical creatures than they are creative, and some are just more creative than they are analytical, and some people excel at both. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you are one more than the other. It just means that, like we were talking earlier, there are, I think it's actually 7 different ways of learning. And in fact, when you go through public school, teachers only really teach you 2, maybe a third if you're lucky. So some of us who did really crummy in high school, like myself, and I had a high school guidance counselor tell me that I would never, ever get a college degree, and yet here I am in front of you talking about psychology theories, and I have 2 college degrees.
Awesome.
And really that's because I just didn't learn like they taught at my high school. That doesn't make me a bad student. It doesn't mean I have ADHD or an attention problem. It means that you bore the shit out of me. So we looked into left and right brain theory, and there's some truth there, but we think there's another way to
I
look
thought
at
that
it.
proved more conducive in primates.
So it was actually the guy who came up with the developmental research for this did win a Nobel Prize for that research. It's based on epilepsy patients, though, and that's when you split that connection between the 2 brains, that's where he started to see that sometimes those patients would have trouble reading or hearing language or would lose capabilities to speak language, and he started to recognize that certain parts of the brain control things. And somebody spun his research wildly out of control and decided to say that everybody is either right-brained or left-brained, to the point that you can still look up articles written in 2018 that talk about this theory.
And magically, corporations call in people to do like team building, and they have everybody in your work group do a test to find out if you're left or right-brained in the workplace. The problem is it's just completely crap.
I think if you smoke marijuana, it just fixes everything.
That's what
Thanks, Pat.
compliments to God.
Oh,
It just all blends then.
thanks, Facebook.
But
Hey,
you're right.
Here's our theory.
Pat said it.
This is actually a theory
I
that
went there.
in 2007, I wrote a paper when I was in my undergrad at the University of New Hampshire for outdoor education. I had to write my philosophy on outdoor education and how it all works. And in my paper, I wrote about this thing called human potential, and that I don't believe we're left and right brained. I actually believe we're up and down brained, which I'll get into. And when I met Hollis, I read her my paper, and we started to think even deeper about this concept that I wrote over a decade ago. And we've been able to come up with our own theory of self-actualization. First thing we did was turn the pyramid upside down. Why did we do that, Hollis?
That's more a representation of what self-actualization is. Self-actualization is not a point you get to and you're just there and you're self-actualized forever. It's more of an expansive place that you're trying to get to, and it's a continuous process. You could go through this as many times as you want or as you're capable of, and that you live a life of self-actualization. It's not just, you made it, done.
So the steps of our theory, the first one is always purpose. With anything that you do, especially in running, you have to have a purpose. Now, there's some people that come into running and they just want to check off their bucket list item that they did a marathon, and that's fine. They're welcome here. We welcome them. We'd love to have them run with us too. And even if that's just their sole purpose is to run the marathon and check it off and be done, that's great. But for others of us, it's much deeper than that. And anybody who's an ultra runner will tell you that people ask us often, what do you think about while you're out there running an ultra? Well, it's not just the birds, the bees, and the birds and the bees, and the trees, and your knees, and all the other E's that you can think of. Really, it's our purpose. Why am I out there? What things am I trying to work through? I'm not running from anything. I'm running towards something. And what I'm running towards is a better life. It's a better sense of self. It's a better understanding of who I am. And so if you can have a well-defined purpose for yourself. For instance, I'm so glad Pat came tonight because, Pat, you've decided to run the Leadville 100.
Yes.
What's your purpose for running Leadville?
I'm lost.
He's really just a crazy old man.
Because I want to just accomplish, see how far I can take myself.
Okay, awesome. If that's your purpose, that's awesome. Great purpose. You can't go through the rest of these steps without having just that in the simplest of forms even. And so thank you for sharing. Once you have your purpose, you go into your brain. And inside your brain, the first thing you need to do is believe that you could run and finish the Leadville 100. Without that, it'll never happen.
Right.
And so this is what we're calling willpower and human potential. There's something deep inside your brain called the anterior cingulate gyrus, and it's what doctors believe to be the seat of will. It's where your willpower comes from. We believe it's actually a place where you can generate energy, and that's what human potential is. And that's why it's unlimited, because it all depends on you. If you believe in yourself and you believe in your purpose, you can generate as much energy in your mind just through the power of thought. Man, it sounds really holistic, but we're going to show you another slide later that kind of actually shows that we believe this is actually happening, okay? And then you can take that energy and transfer it to other places in your brain to make you do this stuff. So that's where the rest of this comes in. Preparation. You've got to get a training plan. You've got to figure out how to run 100 miles. What am I going to eat? Am I going to sleep? What do I wear? What kind of shoes? Like, all those questions are, there's a lot, but all of that preparation comes together and you grab from as many resources as you can to prepare. And then after you've prepared enough, you start putting your plan into action. You start actually moving towards that goal. And so, at some point, maybe multiple times along the way, Pat, once you've put it into action,
There you go.
chances are you're going to experience something called flow. How many people here have heard the word flow before? There's this guy named
Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi.
Holy cow. She's the first person I've ever met who can say his name just like that. Go ahead.
Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi.
Okay, he wrote a book on flow theory. And his theory is actually, I believe, close to being a law. There's enough research to support that it's actually true, but it's basically a state of mind where the world around you doesn't matter anymore. You are just in that moment and just, you figured it out. And I'm guessing you may experience that at some point during the Leadville 100. For sure, you'll have a moment of just pure clarity where nothing else matters, and you're in the moment, and you feel awesome, and you feel great, and you're doing it, and there's a smile on your face. And whether you get to the finish line or not, whether you get that belt buckle or not, you've self-actualized. You don't need to finish the race to do it, but just by going through those steps, you can get there, okay? So, am I off topic on anything, Hollis?
That happened at your Indian Creek.
We'll get there.
In the car afterwards.
Okay. That's good. So, Hollis, how do we define self-actualization? What is it?
First, does anybody else have a definition from self-actualization?
What does it mean to self-actualize?
You can't be wrong. Like, you can just
We trust you. Come on.
Full awareness.
Having said that,
Encompassing awareness.
Totally.
I have no idea. I'm assuming actualization has something to do with the validity of whatever yourself, I guess. So self-actualization is the act of actualizing, validifying, or solidifying yourself and your abilities. So that's what I'm going to go with there.
Yeah.
Making it better and...
Shazam, you were in a spelling bee at some point.
Right? Who wants to know what word I meant? My name.
It was
My name. I said G.
It was actualization.
Okay.
So yeah, it's basically recognizing the full potential of yourself, whether that's in a moment, whether that's in a long span of time. It's recognizing something previously you didn't know about yourself. It's who you think you are, and then you just got surprised by something that you did, something that you completed, and you became a little bit more than you were before.
Like Indian Creek.
Indian Creek.
Yeah, see?
And validating the possibilities you have.
So 2 years after I first wrote that paper, kicking the tires on this idea of human potential, and we're not left and right brain, and there's got to be energy inside of us that we can toss around if we want, I watched a TED Talk by a guy named Ken Kamler. Ken is the ER doctor on the summit of Mount Everest Advanced Base Camp back in 1996 during the Into Thin Air episode, the big accident. You may have heard of a guy named Beck Weathers. Beck was left for dead on the summit of Mount Everest. And he knew he was being left for dead because the call came in on the phone to leave him, and he heard it. And they did. They left him on the summit of Everest to die. 2 days later, Beck Weathers walks into Advanced Base Camp, into the medical tent with horrible frostbite, lost his fingers, his toes, his nose, some of his cheek. And he said, well, where do you want me to sit? And do you take my insurance? Well, how do you go from being left for dead on the summit of Mount Everest to, for 2 days, fight your way down off the mountain, walk into a tent, and have a sense of humor? How do you do that? So Ken has a theory that is a solid theory that supports our theory with these SPEC scans. Now, what is a SPEC scan, Hollis?
The SPEC scan, maybe Nurse could tell us a little better than I can, but it's basically looking at the blood flow in your brain. So we're talking about energy, and this is the tangible evidence of increased energy, which is really increased blood flow and neurons firing within an area of your brain. So this is particularly looking at more blood flow within certain parts of your brain.
So the one on the upper left is the danger moment, when probably Beck was in this place, as it was explained in the TED Talk. Beck was in this place where he's like, oh shit, I'm in danger, I'm going to die here, okay? The middle top is his calmed down brain when Beck has already accepted his fate. He's going to die. And as he's given up, and brain activity has started to wane off.
You're running out of oxygen too.
Mm-hmm. In the upper right-hand corner, however, you can see in the center of the brain this pocket of red energy. That's where the anterior cingula gyrus is, the seat of will. That's where Beck started generating this energy to start thinking about, how am I going to save my life? How am I going to get off this mountain? How am I going to get through this? The bottom left scan, there's an arrow pointing to the prefrontal cortex, which is the front of your brain, which does
all of your logic and your intuition and the higher processes of your thinking. So this is his actually reasoning through, okay, now I want to survive. How do I survive?
And then the middle scan is what was believed or theorized to be the brain scan of Beck actually walking down, actually probably being in the medical tent at Advanced Base Camp getting care, where other people were finally taking care of him and he could kind of rest and let other people do their thing. The bottom right is what a normal SPEC scan looks like. Okay? I do all that right? So, in essence, like, as I say to you, like, inside your brain, there's a place where you can, just through the power of thought, generate energy and get it to move to the other parts of your brain that it needs to go to so that you can prepare and put into action and then experience flow and become a more self-actualized being, this is my evidence. This is what we have so far. And Hollis and I are really hoping over the next couple of years, actually, to continue to do research on this in the hopes that we can get more solidified evidence that shows that, yeah, this is indeed happening. This is indeed what people can do. This is what you're capable of. So when you're a kid and your parents say, now, honey, you can do anything you put your mind to. Anybody who's a parent knows that you're full of shit. You don't mean it. It's just what you're supposed to tell your kid to get them to believe in themselves. But what we're telling you is that your parents didn't know it, but no, they were right. You really can do anything that you put your mind to. So if you want to run 100 miles, you can run 100 miles. If you want to run a marathon, you can run a marathon. If you want to run a 5K, you can run a 5K. If you want to run from here to the end of the street and get the mail and come back home, you can do that too. You really can do anything you put your mind to.
In your research, are you guys going to have a comparison of these scans, the neurotransmitters, as they relate? Because I was just thinking about the cycle of grief.
Ideally, we would have scans that go beyond just blood flow into actual like brainwave activity, so like an EEG cath or something like that, and then neurological signs and also some physiological signs, because this shows us that like from here down, Beck was dead, like physiologically dying, and because he had some willpower and thought about his wife and his kids and he had a reason, this sparked up and got this to survive. Because when he walked back into base camp, his brain was still dying, he was still dying. He just had this amazing moment where he literally pushed himself out of the grave into a medical tent and then proceeded to continue trying to die, and they had to medically revive him. So yeah, there's a lot more to be done, and a lot of it's not being done. So we're hoping to also find people who can help us with this part.
Adrenaline.
Yes.
Yeah, all the hormones.
If you follow
involved.
HPRS, you know in December we did a Reg Fest where I had Patrick Stewart and Jamie Reichler on the screen, and we were
Hi, Jamie.
we were talking about ultra running. But before we even went live on the air, I asked those two guys, "Hey, have you ever had a moment running an ultra or running somewhere where you just suddenly it just felt like you emitted this just beam of energy from you?" And the world just seems so still. And they said, yeah, absolutely. Without a question. Those guys didn't even skip a beat in answering that. So I'm also starting to wonder if this energy that you can generate in your brain and move to other parts of your brain, to get other parts of your body to move, can you actually emit that into the world? And there are people out there who believe that we're all just balls of energy, and when we pass on, our energy gets transferred to other places and other people, new life, and et cetera, et cetera. I don't think it's that far off to believe that that's not just a holistic belief, that it actually is true and it happens. So I'm hoping that as a byproduct of our research, perhaps we'll stumble across some of that. But here's our theory again. And again, Human Potential is it's that voice in your head that dares you to dream it, it moves you to do it, it wills you to experience it, and it's all right there. I'm going to let Hollis have the floor for a bit and tell you a little bit more. Oh, but before we do that, I promised you up and down brain. So the up brain would be your cerebellum. That's both hemispheres, left and right. This is where all your ideas, your dreams, your thoughts, what I want to do, what I can do, what I'm eating for dinner, how do I tie my shoe, everything is in your up brain. And I believe that we're up and down brain. So your up brain is basically all of your thought, your dreams, and your down brain is actually what moves you to do it. The down brain is the cerebellum. It counts for 10% of your brain's mass, and it does 50% of the work. Without your down brain, you're not going anywhere. You're not even walking. You're not even living. You need both. And so I believe that the transfer of energy between the up and down brain is far more important to look at than if we're creative or analytical. Go ahead, Hollis.
Okay. So this is a quote from Angela Duckworth, who wrote Grit, and is the one who came up with grit as more of a theory and less of just saying someone's gritty. And what she's talking about here is that everybody has potential of some amount, which I'll get to, but some people are talented, some people are less talented, but it depends on how you use that and what you do with it that really matters in the end. So. Yeah. I drew some pictures, so don't judge me on my drawings.
These are awesome.
So, we're going to take some of this theory and make it a little bit more tangible. So, we all have a beaker. We're all born with an amount of potential. We don't get to know what that is. So, it's different for everything in our lives. Some of us are phenomenal runners. Some of us are phenomenal violinists. Some of us are not so great drawers. But you have a beaker that you start with. So, when you have talent, that is something you can't control. That's something innate, you're born with, you've got it. Some people don't have it. So what can you do to pile on top of that?
Or I like to say the gifted few. Also known as the elite.
Like Trent.
Trent.
There he is.
Trent.
There's Trent.
You just had more talent than the rest of them.
Trent's beaker was full of stuff already.
So Trent's got some more talent, but you're in the same race as Trent. What do you do? So you have preparation. You have a training plan. You run the miles you're supposed to. You do the speed work you're supposed to. You eat the things you're supposed to. You put all of the pre-work in that you're supposed to. And there's a certain amount of that is the best amount to do so that you're not overtrained or burned out. But there's a level to hit. And you fill up your beaker a little bit more. You get closer to your potential. And then during the actual event, you have your effort. You can expend all of that preparation in this moment of effort. So far, those two talented people who maybe started out the same are still exactly the same. Somebody who started out with less talent is actually behind. Even if you started with the same training plan, you did all of the same exact things, the perfect things for your body, you're expending all of that in the race. So what actually counts for the difference when you beat somebody that you know is more talented than you, or somebody beat you that is not as talented as you, and you guys followed the same training plan? That's where will comes in. Will is this magical thing that does not have a cap. It doesn't have a limit that you can tap into. It's something that goes above and beyond what physiologically you should be capable of. So if I did all the prep and the effort, there should be some sort of physiological cap that I have. You know, talent gives me a little edge on that on top, but that should be all that I have. So why are people able to go above and beyond? It's will. Willpower is a real thing, and it gives you something a little bit more unlimited.
And are willpower and human potential the same thing? Are they synonymous?
Potential is what you have in the capacity. So in this picture, it would be the beaker. It's what you can create. Willpower is what fills it up and actually spills it over into what you are doing, what you're becoming, who you are in that moment, the run that you're having. So some of these are psychological principles from sports psychology we're going to go through that make it a little bit more tangible even on top of that. So in our preparation stage, the way to prepare can be different for everybody, but everybody wants to be on a mastery path ideally. When you're putting all of your effort into one thing and you really, really want that to be your thing, you want to take the path of the master. The master is patient. It takes time. And the secret to the mastery path is that you have to love the plateau, which is really hard to do. So the plateau is where there is no fun gains. There are no, performance enhancing things. You're not PRing. It feels like you're flattening out and you're just never going to get there. If you can learn to love that space and know that it's going to be followed by this amazing uptick in your performance, you can be on the path of the master. The impatient people who just work, balls to the wall through that are the ones who also get injured. And they have this kind of looking graph, and that eventually kicks you out of the sport that you love or the thing that you love because it's not sustainable. So through mastery on your sheets, you have 5 steps to go through to get there. But the essential things you need are instruction. So you need a buddy to tell you how. You need a training plan. You need something that gives you a more tangible way to approach it. What's 2? Help me out. I need my order. Practice. So that could be your training plan. It needs to be deliberate, though. You can't just be wishy-washy about it. You need to actually be deliberate about it. The 3rd one is surrender. Surrender is the hardest one. you need to act like the fool. You need to enter like you don't know anything about what you're going into and surrender to the process. Be the fool. Learn as much as you can, no matter how long you've been in the sport, no matter how long you've been where you're at. If you can always play the fool just a little bit and surrender to it, you'll learn something new, which kicks you up another notch every single time. So and then our fourth one is intentionality. So intentionality is like that preparation. It has to be deliberate. You have to go in there with a purpose. It can't just be, I just want to do this because my best friend's doing it. Like, that puts you on a different path, and it's cool to be there, and maybe that's where you start, but until you're intentional about your actions, you're never really going to master them. And then the last one is ride the edge. And I don't know if you've ever noticed, but success and failure are kind of two pieces of the same coin. When you walk in between them, you're walking this beautiful fine line where all of your effort, everything that's going well for you could tip into this beautiful space where you PR, you have the best race, you eat all the right things, or it could be a beautiful disaster and you lay on the ground and you're, crying. It's the same line you walk, and you have to be comfortable there, knowing that your efforts could tilt you either way, and that it could be some mud that tilts you the wrong way. It could be a beautiful sunshine that tilts you the right way. It could be that they had goose instead of having,
bacon and tater tots.
Bacon and tater
Oh, yes.
tots.
Oh, yes.
So you got
There you go.
That's real food. But, so you have to be comfortable with that line, and that there is, in essence, not a ton of control there, and that's okay. It's hard to ride that line and be comfortable with it, but if you want that chance of amazing success, you have to be comfortable with the chance of failure too. So, and then in our effort scale, John talked about it a little bit, but part of any ultra runner's mindset is that you have to believe that you can more than you believe you can't. It sounds really silly, but there's actually really good research out there about self-efficacy and a positive outcome. You have to believe that there's a successful outcome behind what you're trying to do, and that can radically change the way that you approach something. Once you start to approach something with more doubt than you have belief, you start to create excuses already that make that doubt viable. So later on, you're like, oh yeah, I knew that was going to happen. I was already anxious about that. I already called that earlier. Well, you called it and then you made it happen. Like, that's real.
It's the same reason why we rationalize a DNF to the nth degree. You've got a novel of a story for why you didn't finish a race. But when you finish a race, you just, oh yeah, it was great. Good time. Here's my buckle.
I can always blame my back.
Exactly, there you go. And then commitment versus motivation. So motivation is a finite resource. We do not have motivation out the wazoo. So if you've ever felt unmotivated when you're trying to pursue this amazing goal, no matter how purposeful and how wholesome that goal is, that's normal. It's hard to be motivated all the time. Who the hell is motivated to wake up and get a run in at 5 a.m.? Yes. Okay, Miguel. Only Miguel.
Pat.
3 people. So 3 people in this room are motivated at 5 a.m. So how do you...
Every time my alarm goes off, I'm like, crap.
So how do you get over that motivation fatigue or that motivational choice? You commit. You decide here and now, this is what I'm doing. I don't need motivation to do it because I've already committed, which comes with an if-then plan. So if my alarm goes off and I feel like crap and I don't want to get up, I'm going to go wash my face, and that's going to wake me up, and then I'm going to go on a run. That's your plan. It just gets you one step closer where there's no choice anymore. You don't have to decide. You don't have to be motivated. You just have to do it. Then your last one is in willpower. So coping with adversity. So this is something that HPRS loves to throw into your face. And there are 2 ways, the 2 primary ways people tend to look at adversity. You can either look at it as a threat, and you see it as something that you're not sure you're capable of. In fact, it's probably safer to just turn around and go home. Or you can look at it as a challenge, which is equally tough, and you're still not sure you can do it. But instead, as a challenge, it's something that you're able to meet. So, grit versus talent, same concept as we were talking about earlier. Talent does not beat out hard work. Talent is really nice, But if you can be gritty and you can actually use your human potential, that will that you have, talent only accounts for this much. Willpower is, so far as we know, unlimited. It's not something that we can really measure, because physiologically, our prediction is that you should perform here, and then we watch time and again, willpower just pump you up and you reach here. So, those are my pieces from here. This is John's elevation profile.
So the question is, how is HPRS using this knowledge? The top elevation profile is not an HPRS race. Anybody who's ever come out and run with us knows full well that the bottom one is definitely an HPRS race. If I were to use the course on the top, I'm not going to name where it is, definitely I would flip it around so that nasty hill at the front would be at the end.
It's like a heart rate.
The bottom profile is actually the Indian Creek 50
I knew
mile.
it.
The one on the top is a different 50 miler in the front range. Now, maybe you're somebody that's going out for your first 50 miler. One thing I'd like you folks to do is when you get home later or sometime in the week, go to our website, www.humanpotentialrunning.com. Click on the Ultra Stories tab, and there's a blog, a tab. All our blog posts are on there too. It's not just our podcast, but Hollis wrote yesterday a blog post on the path to mastery. Folks who just want to run a 50 mile and just come out and they want it to be nice and easy and a nice stroll in the park, they're going to get their miles in and get their buckle. I would consider those folks to be dabblers. And perhaps they're not going to sign up for the one on the bottom. And that's okay. Most folks out there think that our goal is to sell out every one of our races and get as many people to our races as we can. That's not my goal at all. In fact, I can tell you exactly how many people have ever asked me how I measure success with my series. And the answer is none. How I measure success is not the number of bodies that I have there. It's not how much revenue I've generated. It's the lives that I touch. Money means nothing to me. It's a made-up thing. Its value is even made up. So, and I've carried that through my life for the last 2 decades. So the money doesn't matter. What matters to me is how I affect people and how I change their lives. I like to create courses that are specifically more challenging. I used to have folks that come out to our Fat Ass series, and a question that I would hear, why do the fat asses have to be so hard? Well, you can run as many or as few miles as you would like. That's your choice. But they're that hard because they're designed to challenge you. They're designed to prepare you for this. So that when you get to this, and you're out there facing adversity, where in the middle of this race, there's an uphill at mile 27 that has 4 false summits. That's a special kind of an back that brings the course out to 52 miles. Wouldn't you know that that pointless out and back accounts for the extra 2 miles? I don't need to make anybody do it, but I do. Because I know that if you do that out and back and complete the 50-mile course, you will face maximum adversity and you will see a better version of yourself when you get to the finish line. So that's what we're doing. We're using a lot of psychology in our races. When I map out a course, I very specifically look for ways that I can put the most bastardly hill of all at mile 40 of the 50-mile run. And I try to get a photographer out there so I can get a picture of runners sitting down and maybe crying and thinking about it. And people think I get immense joy out of this, and I do. But it's not because you're suffering. It's because I know you're learning. That is my job. That is why I love what I do. And that's why I have this running series. So we hope that you'll join us at some point this year. And come out and find out what you're made of. We hope that we can help you realize your potential as humans, tap into that willpower, face some adversity, overcome, and be a better version of yourself. And we know it's not going to be for everybody, but we know that the people that are running with us are the right people.
So I guess it sounds kind of like the actualization is like the limbic system meets the anterior cingulate gyrus. Like they're in connection at that point, right? So in terms of like periodization throughout the year, do you expect kind of like a de-evolution of that process? Are you breaking it back down, or is there a level you should be living at?
It sort of depends on who you are and how you live. If you're also periodizing your runs to start at an easier place and end at a harder place, theoretically you should be getting stronger as you go through those things. So as you are kind of realizing potential that is difficult in the beginning, those things won't phase you towards the end. So it'll take more for you to hit that point where you're questioning, do I have this within me? And then when you decide that you do and you go through with it, it's at a harder level, in a harder challenge. So it depends. There's not really a level that you're not doing it at, and it just might physiologically take you a different place to get there.
Yeah, so as an example, not to toot my horn, toot toot, last year I ran 300 milers, 3 100Ks, and a 200-mile run across the state. That was a huge year. It was the biggest year I've ever had. This year, I'm like, okay, I got a 50-miler, and I've got a 100-miler for sure, and I'm going to Big's backyard. So who knows what'll happen there. But so I used periodization as training. And so when I had such a big year last year, I know that if I'm going to be in the sport for any extended period of time, which I very much want, and it's the entire reason I've been here for 13 years, is I don't train and race balls to the wall all the time and have big year after big year after. FOMO is out of my life. I do not fear missing out on anything because I know what it's going to be here. So this year is a down year so that I can still continue to participate but also recover and learn. So to Hollis's points earlier, this is a plateau year for me. I reached the plateau at the end of last year, and this year I'm just gaining lessons and chilling out. And my body will tell me when I'm ready to kick it back up again. So, and it'll probably be 3 years before I can have a big year like that again. Yeah.
But it doesn't mean you can't self-actualize in the meantime.
Sure.
You can self-actualize without physical means. You can self-actualize playing a game of chess. Like, that's real. It's just in a space that you find. So you might need to find something else when you do have a down year.
I play video games.
Or that. Something up this decade.
Any other questions? Some of our business cards are out by the door. If you'd like on the way out, we welcome you to email us. If you have any questions down the road, if you'd like a better look at these slides afterwards, by all means send us an email. We'll share them with you so you guys can take a look at it. We're presenting again in a couple weeks in Albuquerque at the Association for Experiential Education's Rocky Mountain Regional Conference.
Wow.
Say that 3 times fast for me.
And it's gonna be, yeah, we have, and it's gonna be a slightly different
How
talk.
are they
So
going to put that on the poster?
we really, we very much appreciate you guys having us here. We appreciate R&K so much. Thanks for supporting HPRS and this talk and allowing us to use you folks as our guinea